Alrighty, next up, it says the name is Vaughn Colber.
Hi, yes, it's Vaughn. So I am also in Saskatchewan at the moment, in Regina, just visiting. So I'm mostly from the West Coast, from Vancouver area. And I am, yeah, hoping to start a line, a brand, specifically a made to measure brand. I want to focus actually on shirts for women, like button down shirts, and just do that really, really, really well. Sustainable fabrics, but again, made to measure. So that's because that's definitely throwing some very interesting curves into the mix. And so I'm just really here to learn as much as I can, because like I said, I am starting, would like to launch this brand this year. But there's a lot of work to do to get there. So happy to just learn. And yeah, I would love to know if Mahmoud actually provides fabric, Egyptian cotton. That would be great.
There you go.
Anyways, looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vaughn. And perhaps you should connect with Jess from Double, as they're doing similar made to measure just for bras. So perhaps that's something that you can both meet and discuss about, and maybe learn from how Jess is doing it with her company.
Awesome. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, yeah, we've got about like 8 minutes or so left for these, so I think we'll be able to get through everyone else. Next up is Sajna.
Hi everyone, my name is Sajna. I'm in Toronto. I'm starting a women's clothing brand that is focused on sustainability. So we use AI to generate designs based off of runway trends, and then have a voting system. So we're only producing garments that are upvoted by our community. Like a lot of people on the call, I don't really have a background in fashion. My background is in engineering. I do actually work at Lululemon in my 9 to 5, but I work on the engineering team. So a lot of the fashion, the actual garment area of the fashion industry is very new to me. So yeah, super excited to be here, and I will drop my LinkedIn in the chat, and I'd be super happy to connect with everyone.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Ren.
Hi there, everyone. Sorry I joined a little bit late. I just got off another call where I was presenting, so my voice is almost gone. So I'll keep it short. I have a company called Daily Goods Design Labs. It's a product design, research, and innovation company. And so my background, also not fashion, more product design, interaction design. And so we make and create products for and with women. So we use a term, well, most of you probably have heard of a term called co-creation, but our goal is to create products for and with women. So we always engage women like yourselves, many of you on the call, to join us in the process with the idea of creating products that would be more useful over time. And with many, being a product design background, one thing that I'm sure many of you can relate to is, like the products or clothing that's made for women, typically you don't have a lot of pockets and ways of carrying your tech and tools. So one of the things, our products that we've ended up creating are a series of garments, bags and accessories called makerwear, and it includes aprons, coveralls, shop coats, different bags, and so on. And these were designed upon looking at the tech and tools that women wear and carry on a daily basis. They're stylish yet functional, practical and useful garments that we talk about will improve your overall experience when you're, whether you're working at a desk or working in a lab, etc. And so these, I do have moved beyond the samples set to just a small run of the three different styles of aprons and the shop coats, etc. And I've started to sell those sort of online, but in a very just off of the website. And knowing that workwear is meant to be protective of the next step with these. Right now they're made out of denim, so they are designed to be sustainable. But knowing that workwear itself is meant to be protective. They are protective, but I'm also looking now at, where can we and should we incorporate more technical fabrics, antibacterial, to make the garments even higher value. And also as we look to, you know, allow people, I mean, they're designed for and with women, but they are unisex, so people, you know, men, can wear these as they allow you to carry your tech and tools. We're looking at to see where, you know, if you're carrying your phone, your iPad, or whatever it might be, how should the garment itself respond and then be more functional, if that makes sense.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ren. Kylie.
Hi, I'm Kylie. I'm also in like the startup phase, and mine's less on like the product itself and more on connecting people with their, in essence, authentic style. So it's kind of connecting the mental health aspect with clothing and the power that clothing actually holds and the impact that can have on our lives. So right now developing workshops around that, and have a background in environmental engineering, specifically in waste management. So I understand the implications of excess waste within our streams, as well as how like textile waste is about 30% of our waste. So that's always been something that's been on the forefront of my mind. And just taking that into consideration, that if people start buying what they really love and want to keep it for a long time, then they're going to create less waste, is kind of one of the pieces of what I'm creating. And then encouraging people to purchase secondhand or connecting with other products locally that are sustainable or ethically sourced, so that people have like a resource of where they can purchase those items. So I'm launching I'm in a practicum for professional counseling at the moment, or I will be in a practicum, and that's when I'll be launching the first iteration of a workshop for that. And just happy to be here and connect with other people and see what's going on in the fashion world of Canada.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Kylie. All right, I think I have time for 2 more introductions. So if I don't get to you, I am sorry, but you can introduce yourself in the chat. So next I have Created by Leon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leonie, or if you're speaking French, Leon. But I am currently launching a fashion brand that should be used for charity. I'm hoping to use the proceeds for wrongful convictions, violence against persons who have been imprisoned, Black people. So I can send with the LinkedIn post that has the current designs. They were handwritten by me, and they're in collaboration with a company in Mississauga that makes clothing that's completely recyclable. So it uses old clothing to regenerate and produce new clothing. So if anyone else in this chat is creating clothing or possibly wants to collaborate with another brand, it's really good because they don't let anything go to waste. But my background is like healthcare, pre-med or medicine. I'm gonna take the MCAT soon. And I'm around a family of engineers, so STEM head. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Michaela will be our last video introduction.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michaela. Like a lot of others on the call, I don't have a fashion background. My background is actually in political science and international relations. So I'm very new to this space, but really excited. I'm still in the early stages of coming up with an idea, but I'm hoping to launch my own activewear brand, specifically focused on tennis and tennis-inspired apparel for women, really focusing on very like timeless, classic styles that you can love and wear for years to come, rather than things that are a lot more trend-driven. And I'm hoping to develop it specifically using sustainable fibers and also really prioritizing ethical manufacturing. I think there's a lot of interest from consumers to know a lot more, not just about the fabrics that their clothes are made of, but how they are made and what the production process is like, who is involved in making their clothes. And so I'd love to bring that a bit more into the brand and really have that blend of very kind of classic style, but also those core principles of sustainability and ethical manufacturing, which I found it sometimes hard to find both of those in one brand. So yeah, that's it. And really excited to meet all of you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Michaela. Thank you to everyone who introduced themselves in the chat or on video. I'm very sorry if we didn't have time to get to everyone to do a video introduction. But you will have an opportunity when you go into those networking breakout rooms to do that. But so useful to have everyone introduce themselves. It seems that we have like a wide range of folks from various different backgrounds, various different stages of their business as well. So I know we have two speakers, and I'll introduce them now in a moment, but it sounds like everyone in the room will have valuable insights to provide someone else. So I greatly encourage you to, share your own perspective if you hear a question that you feel like you can answer as well. And it's all knowledge sharing today. So please feel free to, share your perspective and your own lived experience in all the things. So our two speakers today, and speakers, maybe when I introduce you, you can give us a little bit of a wave so everyone knows who you are. We have Adelle Renaud, who is the co-founder and creative director of PEAU, and Tianpei Ma is the founder of Soft Stroke Silks. So Adelle, I'm going to pass over to you to kick us off to tell us a little bit about your story.
Cool. Wow, you guys are amazing. I don't know if I should be the expert speaking today. You guys all sound like you have crazy backgrounds that I can't wait to dig into. A little bit about myself. I'm a serial entrepreneur, fashion, graphic designer. I've got over 15 years experience in the industry, and have kind of truly specialized my talents on, well, in the later half of my career, like the strategic aspect of building a business, creative leadership, really focusing on building brands with strong sustainability sourcing and unique product development strategies. Prior to launching my business in 2012, I worked in overseas and domestic manufacturing. So I've kind of seen from the ground up in the fashion industry. Today, I'm the founder and CEO of a collective called Noble Motives. We have two brands, PEAU, which is primarily e-commerce. We focus on selling non-binary clothing to folks around the world. And then we have another brand called Kaposhi, which we have 10 brick and mortar retail locations across Western Canada. And that sort of focuses more on like the boomer/Gen X target range. So I forget who it was, but was talking about pockets and dresses. We sort of go into that realm. But truly, I'm a self-proclaimed out-of-the-box thinker. I've always approached this industry with that sort of mentality, which has led me down some pretty interesting paths. And yeah, hopefully I can help you guys and answer any questions and give you any insight that I've sort of learned along the way, because there's lots of bumps in this industry, as I think you've all probably experienced in some way or another. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adelle. And Tianpei, we are going to pass it over to you. And I know we have some slides to share along with your story.
Hey guys, so again, it is wonderful to hear all of your stories, and I understand that a lot of you have more experience in the fashion industry than I do. So I'm only here to share my experience and what I went through building my business. So it's literally just me honestly telling you all the things that I went through. My brand is called Soft Stroke Silk, and we exclusively work with Mulberry Silk. And we established the business in 2020 in Toronto. And then if you do remember, that was the year of the pandemic. So obviously in the year of the pandemic, people didn't really care about silk scarves or silk dresses, but we started selling silk face masks, and people used them as liners instead of a medical mask because they were having skin breakouts for constantly wearing medical masks. So especially for people who work in the medical industry, for example. So anyway, long story short, that's how we took off. Then obviously we expanded into other categories. And then today we are mostly in silk lingerie and loungewear and silk beddings and accessories. So those are some of the things that we created. And I know that one of you or two of you were in the made to measure sector. So we do customized silk lingerie and beddings and loungewear. So I would say 99% of the products in our shop are customizable. So you can choose from 90+ colors, you can choose your own size, and then you can even slightly change the style if you so wish. And then it is our belief that, clothes are made to fit you and not the other way around, right? So that's why we do that. And then in terms of platforms, we are e-commerce only, even though there are 2 to 3 stores, 2 in BC, 1 in PEI, interestingly enough, carry our products. However, we are 99% e-commerce. We started on Etsy. I guess a lot of you are familiar with the platform. And then we expanded, so we went on the Bay. The Bay right now, in the summer months, they are doing maintenance, so they are not open to their third-party sellers, but coming in the fall, we'll be back again, hopefully. So Etsy, the Bay, we are in the UK luxury e-commerce platform called Wolf and Badger. We are in a US platform called Spice Rack, and then another Polish one called Saski. So anyway, we are on a bunch of platforms. Our own shop is powered by Shopify. It's an Ontario business, and that's where we are. We are in Toronto. And that's pretty much it. So very nice meeting you guys, and I'm looking forward to chat with you some more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tianpei. All right, so now that you kind of heard a little bit from our 2 of our speakers today and their backgrounds and about their business, we're going to move into our panel discussion, and we have about 50 minutes or so for this. And like I mentioned at the beginning, I've drafted out questions, but I will very much give priority to our attendees' questions. So I might just kick it off to perhaps warm everyone up, so they can maybe if they need some time to think of a question. So to both of our speakers, can you talk about, what you have found to be some unique opportunities and advantages of the Canadian fashion market for anyone that is looking to start their business within this space? Adelle, maybe I'll pass to you first.
Yeah, I think Canada, obviously, we're in a pretty unique opportunity where, I mean, we're a pretty small community, so it's difficult in that shipping costs are high, everything costs a little bit more, which, as a small business, you kind of have to take on a little bit more than say a startup in the US. But if you can sort of figure it out, which we did early on in our growth, was partner with US companies, it allows for a bigger opportunity to grow a little bit quicker. There's also, because Canada is small, there's also a smaller network of people that are there to lend a hand and help out. So there's organizations like this one, like RBC has a women's startup fund as well. So I find you're not going up against as many people when you're trying to get your foot in the door. So I found a lot of success in that. And I mean, Canadians are just friendly. So that also helps when you're starting something. And so, yeah.
Thank you. And Tianpei, how about yourself in terms of, opportunities, advantages in starting your business in the Canadian fashion space?
So I feel like I've got quite a lot of support and resources, and I mean, Startup Canada is definitely one of them, and it's one that we came into contact early. So thank you for the support. But even for the other resources, for example, I'm in Toronto, and the Toronto Fashion Incubator is a non-for-profit organization that we worked with. And by the way, if you're not in Toronto, you can still join their newsletter, and you can still subscribe and participate in things that they organize. Because, for example, last year they had a pop-up, and the lady sitting beside me, she is from BC, right? So even if you're not from Toronto, feel free to join. Another thing that we got was through an organization called Digital Main Street, and we got the support from CDAP. So CDAP is probably also pretty well known in the small business sector. That CDAP you can get, I believe it is $2,400 if you're converting your business to e-commerce. So, and I know that the application is about to close. I think so, I heard. So if any of you wants to take the opportunity, this is a good time to go in. And also there are usually small like grants and funds opportunities popping out here and there, but it's just like sometimes you don't know about them, like they do exist. So that's why when I say, subscribe to Startup Canada, subscribe to, say, for example, the Toronto Fashion Incubator, and then you would see those little opportunities popping up in their newsletters. And also if your city, for example, City of Toronto, the business bureau, I can't remember what it's called, the business sector, they also have a newsletter. So I also subscribe to that in case the city has any funding opportunities. So, none of them is very huge. It's like usually like a couple $1,000s, but to a small business, a couple $1,000s help, right? So the CDAP that we got, the 2400, that helped us to do to kickstart our SEO and, let us have a taste of what SEO is. So I think it's worth it to try those and to subscribe, read those newsletters, apply, and, it's money to help you. And the other thing that I also do want to mention is that Canada may not have been known as a country famous for its fashion design, but e-commerce really allows you to reach out to customers all around the world. To us, about 60% of our customers are Canadians, about 25% are Americans, and we do have customers from Europe, from Australia, and from New Zealand. So if you're doing e-commerce, you really don't have to worry about, that you are in Canada and Canada may not be known as the country for fashion. People around the world would shop with you if you have products they want.
Thank you so much for sharing those resources, Tianpei. I put in a link for the Toronto Fashion Incubator. They are a fantastic resource, or even just to be connected with them. And then my coworker has put in the link for CDAP, so definitely check that out. I wasn't aware of that, so thank you so much for sharing about it. We actually have a question already from Melissa. So Melissa has asked for Tianpei, how did you get into so many stores around the country? What was that process like, and how did you decide which stores you wanted to be in? Great question.
So a little bit about us. I'm from the e-commerce background. So I spent 10 years in e-commerce before I started this business, and I have really zero knowledge about physical stores. All 3 stores that I mentioned, they reached out to us. I think it's probably because they saw us on Etsy, and if you check us out on Etsy, we have, like a couple thousand 5-star reviews. So they were trying to source, and they were probably thinking that we were a good choice. That's how we got in. And in terms of which stores we wanted to be with or we don't want to be with, again, in terms of physical brick and mortar stores, we're at the infancy stage. So anyone who reached out, I checked their website, I was like, okay, sure, what do you want, right? So we also didn't do any filtering or whatsoever.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melissa. I hope that answers your question, or if you have a follow-up. Yep, good. Okay, amazing. I see some questions coming in, and I will definitely get to them. But I think while we're on that subject, Adelle, maybe you can talk about your experience in terms of, you have both an online store and you have, I think you said 10 stores across the country. So can you speak to your journey about, having the online store and then the process of opening your store?
Yeah. So when I first started, I started PEAU in 2012 with e-commerce, and there's so many different ways you can grow a business. So like I said, we partnered with another company called Wildfang in the US, which sort of took us to another level. We got some wholesale orders from a few retailers that kind of gave us a little bit of cash that kind of got going. And then the collective True started when I brought on a business partner in 2015. We had the opportunity to put Team Canada on the pitch for the World Cup in suits, which at that time had never been done. The women's national team that were medal winning, I think at that time they were silver medalists, we're still getting the men's hand-me-downs, which is insane to me. So at that time, I sort of pivoted my business and I was like, okay, we have to fix this. And I sort of took all the work that I was doing in the non-binary space and put my attention there. And trying to get funding was very difficult. Every bank would turn us away. We were able to get a few different grants, but it just wasn't quite enough. So at that time, I ended up doing Dragon's Den, which we got a deal there. But before I ended up doing, I think it was like the Friday before I was supposed to leave to do filming, I had reached out to a bunch of different investors, and one of them essentially offered what I was looking for. And the sort of the trade-off was he's a big time retailer, and he said, I'll help you essentially finance this suit program. In turn, if you can help me build this store for boomers. He's 60 plus and his wife, and they saw a gap in the market just like you guys, and they weren't product people. They understood the retail side of things, and so that's how we kind of have two very separate businesses in both worlds. Brick and mortar versus e-commerce are two very different beasts. E-commerce, truly where you can make money is by having depth in product, whereas especially in Canada in retail, what we found was as we were kind of getting going, everybody wanted something new, something different. So we took everything we knew about e-commerce and we flipped it on its head for retail, and we went into a breadth strategy. So making short runs of products in limited quantities and having them deliver every week sort of idea. So two very, very different strategies. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for delving into that. And we have a few people that are sort of asking follow-up questions as we're going through these. So I want to make sure I am hitting them all correctly. So we have a few questions that are sort of based around manufacturing. So perhaps before I get into those, maybe Adelle and Tianpei, I'll have you kind of speak on like a broader spectrum in terms of your process for manufacturing. So Tianpei, maybe can I go to you first? You know, in terms of what is your manufacturing process? You know, like where are you manufacturing? Is it, you know, in Canada? Is it mostly offshore? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So for our business, we are about 90% offshore and 10% in Canada. So most of our silk beddings, for example, are manufactured in China. And then there's a little region in China where silk is originated from, basically. So you are very, very close to the origin of the fabric. And then, you know, that's where you do silk beddings and silk scarves. But we do also have a tailor here in Canada who works on most of our customized pieces. And I actually still work on some of the smaller things like silk scrunchies in my studio in my spare time. So that's where things were manufactured.
Thank you so much. And Adelle, can you talk about, you know, the process of your own manufacturing?
Yes. So I spent, again, a number of years working in domestic manufacturing in Canada. I worked in the eco sector, making Blue Sign approved garments back when Blue Sign was just starting out. Shortly after that, I went into offshore manufacturing with a sourcing company, so primarily working out of Bangladesh and China, building up a number of contacts. So when I started my business, truly it was one of those moments in life where I had sort of reached a pinnacle in my career at the time, is what I thought. And, you know, I just really wasn't feeling fulfilled. And the spark that sort of led me to take that leap was I was watching Oprah's Life class, and everyone kept saying, hey, you're not truly going to be happy until you're being your authentic self. And that sort of sparked something in me. And I started looking at all my partners and all the mills that we were working with. And it kind of hit me that out of the billions of garments that I was responsible for producing, none of it was made for people like me, somebody who lived a little bit outside of the binary. So I started looking at those partners and also started realizing that you know, every gigantic order requires these mills to overproduce fabric by about 10%. And 90% of the time, this fabric goes to waste. So when I got going, I just started by collecting scraps of fabrics with all the mills I was working with. At the time, they thought I was crazy, and they wouldn't even charge me for the fabric. They just give it for free, which isn't the case today. But that sort of led me sort of down a hole where I just began working with mills all around the world. So today we work with Portugal, Spain, Italy, Turkey, Bangladesh, China, Korea, all over. So we collect scrap fabrics from all these different places, and based off of the fabrics that I find is how I design each collection. We do new drops every single month, and the factories that I work with are factories I've known for too long. They're like family. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And I guess a follow-up question is from Melissa on on your manufacturing process and supply chain. What's your advice on managing your supply chain and your manufacturing cycle? Melissa said they've only done a very small batch at a time and looking to partner with a local manufacturer to do a larger production.
Totally. I think there's like, I'm from Vancouver. I think there's a bunch of shifts that have been happening around the world. I think that it's with places like Alibaba, and there's a number of sites now that are making it easier for everyone to sort of start manufacturing on their own. But it's difficult because you don't really know who's on the other side. You don't really quite, they can give you like a piece of paper that says they're credited, but there has to be something and follow through on the back, which is difficult. I always recommend getting to know the factories you're working with, visiting them. It can be expensive, but if you're going offshores, I think it's a must. And then if you're doing it domestically, again, sort of the same thing. Build a good partnership. Find those factories. They're out there. There's very limited now, but if you find a good one, you can work with them and build up some trust in that relationship. Yeah, and if you're looking for factories too, anybody can reach out, and I'd be happy to make some connections and help in any way that I can. So
fantastic. Thank you so much, Melissa. I hope that was useful to you. I'm also going to put into the chat the other program that I manage is called Startup Global, and we did a webinar on supply chain logistics. So I'll put the link into the chat in a moment. It is centered around, you know, bringing your business global, but there's some really great tips when it comes to supply chain and all of that. Some really great resources. So I'll share that for you in the chat as well. So hopefully you can use that as well. And then a question from Faria. There's no name on it, so I'm going to throw it out to Tianpei and Adelle. Any suggestions on finding manufacturers or 3PL, so third-party logistics within North America? Either one of you want to take that, or if there's someone in the audience that has something that they can chime in on, please don't hesitate.
yeah, I think it's really, I think groups like this, right? Talking to people, asking for help. I mean, you can get pretty far with some Google searches, but doing your homework and you know, is imperative. 3PLs, I don't have too much experience with. We do all of our warehousing and logistics ourselves, but at our distribution center. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I can see that we have a question around customer trust, and I'm making a note of it. But I think it would be great to well, I should pause. Are there any attendees that have a question that they would like to throw it into the group or direct to one of our speakers today?
I have a quick question. Yeah, my question is for, you know, brands that are seeking to bring a global value to Canada, but are still like seeking to, let's say, benefit from resources and funding that are in Canada, but don't, you know, produce their entire supply chain within the country. How are certain, strategies, or have you encountered certain challenges over the years that have stopped you from being able to, or that have, slowed down the process more so from tapping into the Canadian market?
Great question. Adele, Tianpei, either of you want to take that?
Sure. I would like to understand the question a little bit better
Yeah.
because our products are, of course, 90% manufactured in China, as I previously mentioned.
Mhm.
So I think that sort of fits your scenario.
Mhm.
And when you are talking about the challenges, are they more like, aesthetically, or are they more like people are asking to shop local, but you're not local? Which
Yes.
one are we talking about?
Exactly. My products for now are fully made in West Africa and Niger by artisans that are based there. And so when you're looking to brand yourself or market yourself as a Canadian brand, it can be challenging if your products are not necessarily made within Canadian territory. So I was wondering, are there any tips or advices that you have towards navigating those kind of challenges and still being able to benefit from resources like the grants that come from the Fashion Incubator in Toronto or other initiatives that support fashion brands or fashion entrepreneurs?
Okay, so I'm just going to share my personal experience. And the first part I would like to mention is that the grants and all of those fundings, as long as you are a Canadian registered business, we also previously got it's not necessarily a grant. It's like build your Shopify store for free. I'm not sure if that's still there, but it was part of the CDAP when I started. And then it requested that you are Ontario business, which we are. So they really, the criteria rarely includes that all of your manufacturing would have to be done in Canada for you to qualify. So I hope that answers one of your questions. And in terms of branding, yes, we got from time to time customers asking, where your products are made. So from my personal experience, always be honest, like our products are made in China, then we say, yes, they are made in China. And then sometimes, they are asking what kind of manufacturers, then we would share with them, these are the workshops that we work with. We know them personally. And as Adele previously mentioned, we've definitely visited them. We've seen their qualifications. So there are qualifications that could prove that you are like the factories that you are working with are provide a fitting environment for their workers. For example, SIDEX is one of those qualifications, and our factories did take SIDEX. And then that's one of the things that you can say. And the other things that I also just want to mention, and I saw that someone also asked in the question, is like, how can you be a global brand with reasonable pricing if you only manufacture in Canada? Some kind of question I saw in the comment. So also to address that, I think this is the thing. Shop local is the trend, yes. And a lot of people want to shop local, but shop local has layers, okay? So is it shop local? Everything's made in Canada. Like, for example, my clothes has to be made in Canada, but where is the fabric from? Is the fabric has to be made in Canada as well? Where is the yarn from? Where is the cotton from? Are the silkworms raised in Canada? You know what I mean? There are so many little layers of made in Canada. If you were to go to the very source, and I'm like, I only do anything that I would only buy things that has nothing to do with any other country. That is a very challenging thing. So I would say you don't have to, if you are made local, good for you, okay? But if you're not, what I'm trying to say is like, don't beat yourself. Just be who you are. And there are people who would understand and who prefer some of your other qualifications over the shopping local one. Like people have preferences. Some of the checkbox you would check, some of the checkbox you won't check. Like animal cruelty, we are a silk shop. We can't really check that mark. But silk is 100% compostable. So in that sense, we are very friendly, environmentally friendly. They go back to earth. We left no residue with no waste. So just be who you are. And as you mentioned, your the people who work with you, they are people who assumingly work in workshops, and that's something that you could sell. I'd see a lot of shops are shops like your shop. So I I don't think there should be any, problem. So yeah, as I mentioned, yes, we had been challenged before, but as long as you don't lie, you're good.
Thank you.
I think there's also something to be said for like, I think it's sort of gone away a little bit over the last few years, but there was some like marketing and press around like, made in Canada is more superior, when the fact is it's not in a lot of sectors. Like, we don't have the proper equipment, we don't have the proper textile manufacturing set up anymore. That industry was sort of, we left it crumble in the 80s, and we've sort of tried to carve out our niches as we've gone along. And I sit on the board for the BC Apparel Association, and like we're working on trying to make it better. We're working on different initiatives, but we're not there yet. I mean, I've gone in factories in Vancouver that are far worse conditions than I've seen overseas. We have something over in Canada that, laborers get paid piecework. Well, that is highly illegal. That is not our minimum wage. If you live in a city like Vancouver or Toronto, you're not living off of that. So I think there's a lot of like, you can point a lot of fingers and say this is better and that's bad, but it's not black and white. And I think that's especially in the factory world and garment sector, it's all about digging in, getting to know who's behind everything. And like Tianpei said, like, to make a garment, I mean, this sector, I think, it's the only sector that hasn't grown with inflation. It's decreased with inflation. So the end consumer looks at this as something that's very easy, and it is not very easy. Like, even just to mill the fabric that we use to sew the items, like, there are so many processes that go into every single piece along the whole way. So you can't blanket it. All you can do is do your due diligence, do the best work you can, and like, truly finding the best factory partner is going to come from, like I said, this room, talking, visiting, digging, learning, getting your hands dirty, and you'll put your pieces together. But don't pigeonhole yourself. That would be my recommendation, in saying it's great because it's made in Canada, because there's more to it. And the consumers are getting smarter. They're starting to understand that, and transparency, I think, is king.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Fantastic questions, Satu. Thank you so much. Miriam.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in. I know that Tianpei had some slides to share on outsourcing. Did you want me to go over that now?
Sure, that sounds great. Thank you. So since we are still on that topic, I just want to quickly share some of my experience with people. Now, a lot of us, some of you have already picked your products, but for people who haven't, I got a lot of questions asking that when you're outsourcing or when you are picking your products, what to consider. So if you're outsourcing, meaning if you are doing things in another country that is not Canada, considering the shipping process, these are the things that I recommend that you take a look at. Those are the good things that you would consider. So for example, if your product is small in size, a necklace versus a pair of shoes, okay, lightweight, okay, if you're doing something really, really heavy like boots, right, you got to take that into consideration. Won't be easily crushed or broken in transit, okay. High value. So for example, I'll take silk as an example. A silk scarf is relatively high value, but very small in size. Essentials, okay, when you're picking your products, is it something that is essential to people's lives, or is it something that they're gonna say, I'm not going to buy it because I'm not getting a raise this month, right? So is it essential? And is it evergreen? Evergreen meaning is it like trendy or not trendy? So is it something that people will forget in two years, but you've already invested so much in this category? Is it giftable? If it is giftable, you're gonna be able to benefit from the October, November buying trend. Is it a consumable? Meaning, does it get sort of consumed? I know it's a little bit hard for fashion industry, but consider underwear. people change underwear as if they were consuming underwear, but a jacket would not be sort of a consumable. That's what I mean. Is it one size and doesn't have any fitting issue? For example, earrings. Okay, that would be a nice one. Conversation starters. If your customer is wearing this product out, would people want to reach out and have a conversation with them? In which case, they may learn about your brand. In which case, lingerie may not be such a good product. Not easily replicated. So this one, of course, it's easy to understand. And then, so another thing that I would say that I would usually recommend mid-ranged price for people who are starting, and there are reasons to it. So if you are priced very low, sometimes people are not very confident. And they were like, well, let me just price low so that I can compete with others. And by pricing low, first of all, back to the Chinese manufacturers in the market, you can never be as low as them. That's me, honestly speaking. Okay. And then the other thing is like, if you price low, people doubt the quality of your products sometimes. But then you are like, well, then why don't I just do luxury? I would do, sell a necklace at, $2,000 or sell a scrunchie at $200, which I have seen before. So the problem with that is that to kind of build a luxury brand, it's like you need to make sure that every single aspect of your brand is taken care of. Your customer service, your copy, your image, and everything needs to be aligned with other luxury brands that are priced similarly. And for someone who's starting, this can be very challenging. That's why I say mid-priced products are usually a good point to break in. However, I also want to say, yes, I have all of those criteria on the left, but this is not to say that your products needs to check all of those boxes. This is only for you to consider that those may be the challenges that you will run into if you pick this product or the other product. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Perfect. So just want to quickly also cover outsourcing without taking too much of a time. When you are picking a supplier, and in this case, of course, you can consider local. I recommend that you consider local. It would give you some competitive edge. If not local, then close to the source, right? If you're doing cotton, Egypt. If you're doing silk, China or Vietnam. And then the other thing is that always, if you have a family connection, if you know someone or if you can get to know someone, what a good tailor can do for you is a lot when you are starting. So when we were starting with our lingerie collections, if we were to go to the manufacturers and say that, hey, those were the lingerie styles that we want. And now by then we already got a pretty good relationship with factories. But if we didn't have that relationship, if we were just starting the lingerie collection, usually, they have a minimum number of pieces that you have to order if you are doing one style and one color. But if you have a good tailor that you can work with, you can literally just produce one per piece per size, and then you can test them before you decide to run with the factories. Another question I got is Alibaba still option? That's usually what people ask. It is still option, but as Adele mentioned, you gotta be very careful when you are looking at people on that platform. Now Alibaba now has just introduced something called Alibaba Guaranteed. So I feel like that's an extra layer of security if any one of you is still sourcing from Alibaba to find your manufacturers. So large versus small, I would say when you are starting, try to find someone who may be small but have a good reputation. If they're small, they are more likely to customize for you. They're more likely to listen to you. We've literally went through the process in which we started collaborating with a small factory and they grew big, they became better, which I'm happy for them. But then they sort of stopped listening to us and they started saying that, you are not meeting our minimum number of requests and so on and so forth. So small is good in the beginning. Certifications, consider CEDEX is the certification that is for the labor conditions that I talked about earlier, OEKO-TEX. So those are all things that you can look at. OEKO-TEX, I think a lot of you know, are non-harmful dyes, non-harmful material. And then when you are placing the order, definitely have everything ready, the specifications, the price, the delivery date, the tag, the packaging, and then the penalties. Have everything, discuss everything beforehand instead of going into those difficult conversations later. Then if you are outsourcing with the Asian countries, definitely expect a lot of late night or early morning communications, because that were the time when you are both online. So I just want to quickly go over that because I think it's going to address some of the questions in the crowd. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for putting this together and going through it for us, Tianpei. Yeah, I think that was very useful for anyone who's thinking of outsourcing or in the process of it, perhaps. So we have about 15 minutes left for questions. I do still have quite a lot I can get through, but again, I would love to put out to our attendees to see if anyone has any questions they'd like answered.
Can I speak on Ren's question maybe? We already talked about it a bit earlier, and there's like super great points. But in terms of like the made in Canada idea, and I kind of think that like reasonable price point and made in Canada maybe don't go together super well. And I think even for Wicked Rose, like we are a more premium price brand, but even for us, there's a limit on what our market is willing to pay. And so we suffer on like margins for that, and it doesn't leave any space for wholesale. And so from what I understand, kind of the classic in the apparel industry would be like if you pay $15 for a shirt, you wholesale it for 30, you retail it for 60, so that you get a 50% and they get a 50% margin. Well, for us, our tops cost $45 each, so we would have to wholesale for 90, retail for 180. Our market's not willing to pay that. They're only willing to pay 85 or 90 for a top. And so I find my customers do really, really love, the made in Canada thing. And I do think they're willing to pay a little bit extra for it. But even as I'm going into spaces where it's like sell the dream, like how big can you get? And they're like, you have to get offshore. Like you can't stay onshore forever. You need to think about scalability into the future. And so that is something to consider. But Tianpei, like great point on like, yeah, it's made in Canada, but where is everything sourced from? So like everything is technically sort of hyper local for Wicked Rose. Like, we work with Kendor for fabrics, and I have all my clothing tags here and my patterns and things like that. But Kendor sources globally. Like they do a good job of looking at your suppliers, but your fabric is still not made in Canada. And if it was made in Canada, it would be $1 bajillion. And so that's something to consider as well. I had one more thought, but it's totally gone. So that was, yeah, just kind of the miscellaneous thoughts on that front. Oh, actually, it was just that I have been suggesting kind of to people who come to me who have ideas. I had a couple girlies who wanted to create bras or t-shirts with built-in bras, and they're talking to these like clothing like making houses that will like source everything for you. And for me personally, I find them to be a little bit predatory sometimes, because they're like, oh, we'll make you a sample for $15,000, and your first order is going to be 50K. Your first sample is going to be 50K, and then like the first full order is going to be like 100. And so the plus side of local manufacturing that you do on the back end yourself is that like their minimums are really low. Like it's only 50 pieces, quicker turnaround times. Like I'm seeing my manufacturers multiple times a week. So it is really good as you're just starting out, maybe to do R&D within Canada and then potentially move offshore so that you can send samples over that you've already created, and something just to consider in that front. Plus, I have friends who've done overseas manufacturing, and they have a lot of trouble where it's like the first order comes in and they have 300 pieces and the quality is really bad and something's gone wrong with it. Well, for this, or maybe you're having trouble selling it. And for this, it's like, okay, well, maybe you pay more, but you only have 50 and you can kind of test the market. And so that's something maybe to consider. Start local when you're small, and then, grow overseas. But thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, they're great points there. And Adelle and Tianpei, maybe there's an opportunity to talk about so Adelle, you mentioned earlier transparency with your customer base? And is there an opportunity when you're kind of talking about, made in Canada, is there an opportunity for transparency and storytelling with your customer base to, I suppose, kind of break down the costs, or kind of showcase to your customer, like, this is the transparency around our pricing, or this is transparency around where we're sourcing, how we're manufacturing, that sort of thing. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think Everlane was the first one to really do it in a big way. Yeah, it's hard. I struggle on what is good transparency and what is too much sometimes. We're in the midst of sort of reflipping what that looks like. I think that, so there's like what we do a lot with our upcycled fabrics is we'll share that with our community, being like, hey, vote on which fabric you like. That's how I get, fabrics that I get to choose from. I get like little photos. Hey, we have this left over. Do you want it? And I'm like, ooh, I don't know. Can it make a shirt? So I'll flip it to my community and get them involved in that way. As far as like putting our factory information on our website, like doing the Everlane, no, I don't know if that's necessarily needed. I think that, again, depending on what your brand is going after and where your standards are, like there are so many certifications. Like I have different factories that specialize in different things. Like I'm not going to make a pair of denim necessarily in Italy because that's just not their specialty. I'm going to make it in Bangladesh in a workwear factory that specializes and has all the proper machinery and all the tools. And yeah, am I answering your question properly? Sorry, I feel like
No,
my brain's a little fuzzled today, but
no, absolutely. Yeah. I think there's definitely a time for transparency, or especially perhaps if your brand is, sustainability focused. I think that, like, so for your upcycled fabric that you use, I think it definitely comes into play. But then, yeah, when you're talking about pricing, how much is too much information to be divulging?
yeah, I think, I think the future is radical transparency. I think that's the way we're headed. There's a number of bills that are being passed, in New York, and I think that's the way it's going to go. But for a long time, like, your factories are your advantage, right? Like that's what sets you and gives you, it's the relationships you've built. Like a lot of the factories I work with, like, again, like this is 15, 20 years of history that we've built together. They're my secret sauce, right? Like it's, so to put it out there to everybody, I don't know, but is there a way that we can trace our fibers and, like, show this is where the cotton came from and this is the dyes that went into it, and these are, like, I think there's a way that can be done. Yeah, it's very interesting.
It is, and I find sometimes that if I see a small business and if they're like a CPG or they're fashion and I consider their prices to be high, me personally, I'm actually more inclined to buy from them rather than to buy a similar product with a similar price from like a larger global brand, because in my head I'm thinking I'm paying that price for that large global brand purely on their brand. Whereas for a smaller business, I perhaps because I work in the space, I'm just thinking, like, I understand when you're a small business, there's various different things that come into play with, how much you're manufacturing.
Well, it's hard too, though, because, like, you might, paying more doesn't necessarily mean what you're buying is better, right? Like factories, for a lot of our economies of scale, right? Like if you buy 200 of something, they're going to charge you $10. If you buy 500 of something, they're going to charge you, say, $8. If you buy 10,000 of something, they're going to charge you $6. So it high price tag doesn't necessarily mean you're buying into quality. I think it's like truly, like, even for us with PDL, like our shirts we sell for short sleeves are 68 and long sleeves are 78. And I've really, really tried over the last 10 years to keep our prices like that. Our community, you know, they don't necessarily, some have money and some don't. And so there isn't a lot of options. Well, there's getting to be more, thankfully, but like really there wasn't a lot of options for my consumer to buy products. So we would go on sale 50% off once a month. I'd cut my margin in half for it to be accessible to everybody. So it kind of started out like just as like a one-time thing, and then it was people really liked it. So I don't think there's like a blanket rule that you can say, you know, price means not quality and etc. I think it's like what does your brand message want to stand for? What do you want to do? So I think you can tell that story and that narrative and get what you're doing across in various ways.
Thank you so much, Adele. Tianpei, I don't know if you have anything to add to that topic.
Yeah, we haven't really done the pricing transparency thing either. It is, to my knowledge, though, it is pretty obvious, but maybe it's because I'm speaking from a place where I've been in fashion for quite some years. But you know, like this price of silk is pretty consistent. So you can take a look at how much silk chamois costs, and then you can sort of imagine the cost of making a shirt when you are doing customizations, and then you add on the profit margin. So we are not a brand that price our products to get like a 200% or 300% profit margin. That's not who we are. And I think I hear people when they're saying that if you are doing wholesale, these are the pricing that you're adding to your cost, and is not a price that the market can accept. And I would like to say that e-commerce is a little bit nicer in terms of adding the margins. Sorry, in terms of, you know, increasing the price to cover all of the cost. Okay, I'm gonna start over. This is the thing. We have been e-commerce. Almost like 99% of our sale came from e-commerce. Why aren't we doing wholesale? Because I haven't found a way. Because they all want me to mark my products 200, you know, percent to be sold in big chain stores, and we're not willing to do that. However, on e-commerce platforms, the fees that they charge range from, in my experience, from 3% to 30%. 30% is already very, very, very high. Okay, it's like what a luxury e-commerce platform would charge you. Still, though, it's better than, you know, you are selling a shirt at $100, and then the wholesalers want you to sell the shirt to them at $50 or $40. You know what I mean? So I would almost say, to a small business who doesn't have the funding, who doesn't have the scale, e-commerce may be the way to go.
And a great way to.
One more thing I was just going to quickly say to Christina. If you're like at a place where wholesalers are actually coming to you and asking you for your product and you have a demand, you can also do like, so say there's 1 or 2 items within your collection that are like your hits. You could take just those pieces offshore and scale them, and you keep your core brand. So your consumer that's coming you as a D2C, they know you, they know they can constantly get that quality. That's where you kind of have fun, you innovate yourself, you sort of change things, and then you have that separate business and it operates slightly adjacent. And again, you can do offshore still very well and have integrity and all of the other. So there's just an education component, and then you can get that margin. And truly, when you're going into it all depends on your business and what you are. Like there's no rule. If somebody comes to you with 1,000-piece order for your shirts and they want it at a certain price point, like you don't need 50 points on it. You just work out what it works for your business, what cover your cash flow for that month. Because truly, if you can get them to keep reordering, we work with Urban Outfitters for the last 3 years, and at first it was sort of the same thing. They wanted 60-day terms and they wanted, you know, all this stuff. And I was like, how am I going to do this? Like there's no money to be made. But when I looked at my cash flow and I looked down the line, the cash that I needed and what it would do, I was like, oh, this is perfect. Because how it worked out was I've now set them up that they pay for my production. So now on my D2C business, my e-commerce, I can breathe a little bit because they've paid for my product. Anything I make on my product on my D2C is now covered. It's essentially just profit. So you can work and build strategies that work for your business. There's no, don't get confined to rules of what things have to be. It's really make it to you.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, I've spoken to people and they're like, oh, if you can just break even on wholesale, then it's fine at this point, kind of thing. But for me personally, the wholesale, because we're such a niche market, would be more so most likely partnering with gyms to create like co-branded custom gear for them. But really interestingly, I think I was just assuming that we would be too expensive for gyms, but I was speaking to the owner of a gym recently, and I mean, she's a woman in martial arts, so it makes sense that she prioritizes this. But she was sharing what she's paying for their garments, and it's really not that different than what we're paying from Pakistan, and the quality is terrible. And I'm like, if I can take this out of your hands, you know, would this be something you're interested in? She was like, that would be amazing. And like, she already wears this stuff. And so things along those lines. But I have considered the whole, like, you know, move offshore specific for like the wholesaler, the gym partnerships. So thank you.
Perfect. Very cool.
Oh, actually, the last thing I was going to say when you mentioned earlier about Canadian, they just let me on the board of the BC Apparel Association, so we can be friends now. But about Canadian manufacturing not having, you know, it's moved offshore, and you can make better garments, specific activewear garments offshore, because they have the scale, they have all of the machinery and things like that. So even on that front, it's something to consider.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We have time for one more question before we go into our networking breakout rooms. Anyone have a question?
Yes. Yes. Actually, yes, I do. I launched my online business, as I was saying a couple of weeks ago. And in comparison to physical sales, like physical sales for me were really good. Like I worked through pop-up events. So in these events, people would see the recycled fabrics or the fitting or the colors. It's already real. But the problem is my online sales are really bad, like in comparison to physical sales. So how can I shift this trust issue? And for as well, like is it a process, or it's a duration time? I mean, sales. How can I improve?
Okay, thank you. If I'm understanding correctly, so your in-person sales are fantastic, but you are looking for support in how you can increase your online sales.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, and like kind of building the customer trust. I think I saw your question come up.
Yes, it's me.
For sure. All right. Yeah. So Adelle, Tianpei, any suggestions on that in sort of increasing sales from the e-commerce side of things and trying to sort of mimic the experience that they're having when they're, you know, getting great in-person sales?
So I'm going to jump in, and I think it's probably a good time to pull up the other two slides of mine, if it's possible. And while you are working on pulling the slides up, I would also like to say that if you've got great pop-up experience, that's fantastic. That means that your products are verified by the market, and all you need to do is to replicate that success on your online place. Okay, so I do have a program that I could recommend to you, but I want to cover my slides first, and then also the program, unlike the funding ones that I suggested before, the program is a paid one, so I don't want to be seen as advertising for the program. Anyway, though, the e-commerce tips. First off, you know, I know a lot of people were saying, well, if I want more online sales, should I advertise more? The first step is actually to choose the right platform. We're on multiple online platforms. On some of the platforms, we do nothing. And then the sales came in. On some of the platforms, we advertise and we spend dollars, and then the sale came in. On some of the other platforms, we do everything and there's no sale. And I can let you know that, sorry, it's still the first slide. So I can let you know that, for example, when we first onboarded on the Bay, we saw a lot of sales like from the first month, and that's because we are more of a mid-ranged product and category, and then the base mostly middle class customers, women in their late 40s, 50s. So it's a very good fit. However, when we onboarded on Walmart, because Walmart came knocking and Walmart was like, we saw you on the Bay, why don't you want to be on our platform as well? And I was like, sure. And then we went on Walmart. Guess what? Like in the whole year, we probably got 2 to 3 sales. So that's how compatibility works. Your brand has to be compatible with the platform that you're on. And then I would recommend for people who are starting to start on the open e-commerce platform. So that's the second bullet point here. Open e-commerce platform means that platforms that you can just go on without going through a very long application process and without a very strict approval process. So like Etsy, like Amazon, those are open platforms. Choose the one that's right for you. And then I'm going to talk about how to. But anyway, before that, I would say get to know yourself. I know that you were saying that you are having great pop-up experience, and I can tell you that I have really bad pop-up experience. And that's not even because my products don't sell. They sort of sell, but I just really, really don't like pop-ups because I'm an introvert and I have very, very low energy level. Whenever I go to pop-ups, it kind of kills me. Okay, I took like a week to recover from my pop-ups. That's how bad it is. Okay, so know yourself. If pop-up is your thing, consider grow the pop-ups and then you consider the online. So not every single channel is for everyone. So that's what I sort of wanted to mention earlier. Anyway, though, now you're like, okay, I'm good at pop-up. I really do want to grow the online part. You first go to the open e-commerce platforms. You build your sales. You do advertise a little bit, and then you offer some discounts, and you eventually bring people to your own website. So that's a battle that you have to fight. I know that a lot of people have only Etsy shops, and they're pretty happy on Etsy, but there is always a risk on the third-party e-commerce platform that they would close your shop without you knowing, without you being able to do anything. Okay, so Shopify or whatever e-commerce, like your own website that you whatever tool that you use to build your own website, that's a must. And then the other thing that people always ask is that after you've got your own website, how do you bring people to your own website? So there are multiple ways to do that. Unfortunately, I can't really cover everything in 5 minutes, but all I need to say is that, find your way. For example, some people are really great at social media. Okay, I've seen a similar Toronto silk shop that has like hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok. So it's very obvious that all of their traffic came from their social media. For us, our traffic came from the open e-commerce platforms and the invitation-only e-commerce platforms. That's because I'm personally from e-commerce. And when we have a lot of reviews on those platforms, people find us, Google us, and land on our own site. So that's another way that's totally different from the social media path. Okay. And if you're good at pop-ups, then use your pop-up to direct your customer to your own site. Give them discount coupons to say that, get this, and then if you order on my site, we give you 15% off, or things like that. So use whatever works for you. There's not one single way. There are multiple ways to get people to your site. And spending money on SEO and Meta and TikTok advertising is only one way of the many ways. So I hope I'm clear on that.
Yes, you were.
Okay. Yeah. So that's probably that. And I'll just quickly mention that there's the marketing analysis part as well. If we could go to the next slide. So after you land on the platform, don't just like start selling and then be like, well, why are there no orders? First of all, you need to do the market analysis, and then there are different tools. For example, if you're on Etsy, there's a tool called Everbee. They also have YouTube channels. You can check it out. If you're on different platforms, there are different tools that you can explore. How large is your pool? For example, if you are selling, for example, lingerie, right? How many people are actually searching for lingerie on that platform. If there are only 100 people searching, regardless of how compatible the platform is, you're not going to sell. Regardless of how great your product is, you're not going to sell because your search pool is not there. And then if your search pool is there still room for you to grow as a new seller? Because when you're using those tools, they also tell you that, are the top 1% sellers getting 99% of the revenue from the search? If so, your chance is very slim. What we want to see is like the top 1% is getting maybe like 20% of the revenue, and then it trims down. Then you have a chance. So that means it's not a market that's like already dominated by the big sellers. And then lastly, of course, intuitively, you learn from the top performers. You look at their titles, you look at their copy, keywords, images, price, you look at their everything, making sure that everything is perfect before you come, you come back and say that, how come I don't have sales, right? So first we have all the work done. And if there's still no sale, then we've got a problem, but not before we got all the work done. And another thing that I do want to mention is that when you are learning from the top performers, don't just copy them. It's just not working. It's just not working. And then another thing that people usually forget is that when you are on those top performer pages, those top seller products, read the reviews, see what people are complaining about, see what people like, see what the issues are. So all of those things are things that we could do, before we were to say our products just don't work with e-commerce, because 99% of the chance they do. I'm sort of an e-commerce believer. That's why. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm taking so much time.
No worries. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope that answers your question. So we're going to dive straight into our networking breakout rooms.